So, welcome to part 2, method feeder fishing on a commercial. I'm James Robbins and I'm going to show you a few tips relating to this awesome method. First point is casting. Obviously we're not casting a big distance here, just about 20-25 metres with the 10'6" rod. I'm going to pick a marker on the far bank and aim to cast as accurately as possible. I've also clipped up with my reel to ensure that the distance remains consistent. So a good smooth cast, the feeder hits the clip and I'll just put the rod straight down. I think that's really key, because if you start swishing the rod to sink the line or move the rod a big distance to your rod rest, you'll actually move the feeder away and the feeder will start breaking up and you'll actually lose the effectiveness of the method feeder. So all I do is cast and then just very gradually tighten up to the feeder. You'll also notice that the rod rest is pointing almost directly forward, so when I put the rod down, when the lines hit the clip, I don't have to move the feeder away from that catching zone. So as you can see now, everything's set perfectly. The line's sunk and I've got a slight tension on the tip, so I can see any slight indications, any line bites of any fish about. And I've also got the rod completely independently. So I'm not knocking the rod in any way and I'm just waiting for the classic method bite. So I'm expecting the tip to either fly around or drop back. Any little taps or knocks like that there, I'll just ignore that. That's just the fish moving around the area, knocking the line and taking some of the ground bait. As you can see, that was a pretty violent take or bite, and you can also see how fantastic the action of this 10'6" Mat 3 XT is. The rod's bending round fantastically in the top, and I've still got plenty of power in the bottom middle section to play the fish. So the other beauty of using a shorter rod like this is you can play the fish much more effectively at close range and bring it up really close. You can also see how smooth the drag is on the Mat 3. When the fish makes a sudden charge like that, the line gives extremely smoothly. So, there we go. Another decent carp, bites the dust. How about that? Took that on the running feeder, and that's actually taken a mini boilie. A really key tip in relation to your ground bait feeder mix is to keep it fresh and don't let it dry out in the sun or get wet when it's raining. So what I actually do is I'll only keep a small amount of ground bait in a bait tub like this on my bait tray, and I'll keep the rest of it in my ground bait bowl. Another key factor to think about is how you actually load the ground bait onto the method, and this is often overlooked. You don't want the ground bait to be too stodgy and not break down quickly. So basically when you reel in, you want to find that all the ground bait's dispersed from the feeder like this. And a really great innovation that's evolved with method feeder fishing is this mould system. So I'll quickly show you how it works. Basically place the bait in the mould, fill it with ground bait, then press the method feeder into the mould, and you get an absolutely fantastic shape form of ground bait on the method feeder with the hook bait placed smack in the middle. So that's absolutely irresistible to the fish. They come to the method feeder, the first thing they see is your hook bait, and they're straight on it. The other nice factor about it is the fact that it's aerodynamic, so it casts very well and is very accurate. As with all forms of fishing, it pays to vary the hook bait that you're using. Different baits will have different effectiveness on different days. And today, I've started off using a small red mini boilie like this. I've also used red corn, yellow mini boilie and single or double dead red maggot. Most effective today has been the red maggot. But like I say, it depends on the day, and it's always good to try different bait options during a match, find out which is working best. Another great advantage of using a method feeder is the fact that you can change your hook lengths and hook baits very rapidly using the quick change swivel. So this is obviously a big time-saving advantage during the match. So as you can see here, it takes a matter of seconds just to change your hook bait from, say, a red boilie to sweet corn. You can actually be preparing the different baits on the different hook lengths while you're waiting for a bite. And that's also true when you think about actually setting up your feeder with the bait and everything in situ ready to cast. So quite often in a match you'll see people have got 4 or 5 feeders ready to go with the ground bait loaded. So when they reel in, all they've got to do is unclip the feeder and clip on the new feeder with the bait ready to go, and you're fishing. So it really saves a lot of time, a lot of valuable time during the match. So in part 1 I mentioned that I'll often use 2 different types of ground bait. 1, your standard fine ground bait mix, and 2, some dampened down 2 or 3 mil pellets. And in many cases I'll actually use both. I'll make a sandwich effect. So I'll put pellets to start with and then finish off with ground bait over the top. Now I think this gives a great advantage because you get the instant attraction from the ground bait on the top, and then you actually get the pellets underneath that will remain on the feeder for a longer period. So this is particularly useful when you're waiting longer for a bite, maybe waiting for a bigger fish, or when the fishing's harder and you're leaving the feeder out more than 5 or 10 minutes. So you can actually leave the feeder out with some confidence that some bait is staying on and around your feeder. When the fishing's really, really good, then you'll often see that people will just simply load the feeder with pellets. Obviously this is going to maximise the amount of bait that you're feeding and allow you to hold the fish very, very effectively in your peg. So that's for a day when the fish are feeding well and you're not going to overfeed the fish. A couple of final tips to think about when you're method feeder fishing is always ensure that your hook point is sharp, because as soon as the hook point becomes blunt, you'll find that you start missing loads of bites or not catching fish. Basically because the fish are sucking up the bait and the hook's not penetrating into the fish's mouth. So always ensure that you've got sharp hooks, and the best way to do that is just to hook on a maggot or a caster and see if it bursts. And another sneaky trick that I've learned, sometimes when you're feeder fishing, your method feeder hits the bottom, you get a few quick jabs on the tip where the fish are intercepting the feeder, knocking the ground bait or pellets off, and then leaving it alone. And a good method around this is actually to form a small ball of ground bait around your hook bait and actually fish that independently to the feeder, so still set up the feeder in the same way, or incorporate it into your method feeder as well. So that's a sneaky method of catching fish on days when they're not really having a method feeder. So that concludes the presentation. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope some of the tips will help you catch a great net carp just like that. If you've got any questions relating to the products or tactics used during the video, please don't hesitate to drop me an email. Cheers.